again. That was just a, first take.
Making sure we were listening.
You might want to round some microphones in case you're planning to speak.
Yeah, mine was asleep.
There we go. Thank you, Chris. There we go.
Good evening and welcome to the meeting of the Overview Scrutiny and Panel Environment, Communities and Partnerships. We'll start on the agenda. We've got apologies.
Okay, apologies. So we have apologies from Councillors Criswell and Councillor Shaw.
Thank you. We'll move on to the minutes, agenda item 1. We approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Are there any comments or adjustments on the minutes of the last meeting? Are you happy for the chair to sign them?
So, members' interests, has anyone got any declarations for disclosable pecuniary or other interests in relation to the agenda item? Councillor Alban.
There we go. Thank you, Chair. Item 5, Hilary, who's speaking from the County Council, she and I both play in the same band.
Thank you. And I've got a declaration on that one. I am a member of the Flood Action Group for St Ives. Anyone else got any declarations? Councillor.
Same as yourself.
So moving on to item number 3, the working programme. Has everyone had a read? Anyone got any comments?
No, I have something to add on it as well.
Thank you.
So obviously you've seen the work programme and the notice of key decisions there in the agenda pack. An item came up last night within the corporate performance report at the performance and growth meeting, which was requested that we form a working group or a task and finish group to look at disabled facilities grants, and that would fall within the remit of this panel. So I will be sending around an email shortly to see who would be interested in that, and then I will liaise with the officers to get that set up and moving along. So just to let you know, that email will be coming, but I'll be sending it to the whole panel so that those who aren't here this evening have got the chance to be involved in that as well. Are there any other questions on the work programme or the notice of key decisions? Councillor Alban?
Thank you, Chair. Could we have an update, please, on a future meeting on Hinchinbrook Country Park, where we are in the progress?
We actually have an update planned, scheduled to come to the meeting, this panel, in the next couple of months. So that's already scheduled into the work programme. That's already scheduled on the agenda.
Thank you, Chair. That's great. And also, I presume we'll be getting an update on the green bin scheme.
I haven't got in so many words scheduled in, but I know there's something in the pipeline. I can see Oliver might just jump in there as well.
I was meerkatting at the back, Councillor Alban. It's proposed to bring that back in March to give an update on progress with the scheme. So, yes, hopefully you get a chance to comment on it then.
Thank you, Councillor Alban. Has anyone got any other questions?
Do you want me to mention about item 4?
Yes.
So item 4 is scheduled to be an item on the Great Fen. As the panel knows, I've obviously already emailed you. The lady that was coming along to that, unfortunately, due to unforeseen circumstances, is not able to attend this evening. So we're going to defer that item to a future meeting, and I will rearrange that with her to get that back into the work programme. So unfortunately, we're not going to hear that item this evening, as she was coming in from the Cambridge and Bedfordshire Wildlife Trust. So we're moving straight on to the flooding management update.
Thank you. I think we've got Hilary from the Cambridge County Council going to give us and Oliver? Yes. Give us a short presentation.
Thanks very much, Councillor Kerr. So it's going to be a bit of a double act this evening. So the history of this is that after the sort of flood events of Christmas 2020 and into January 2021, the council actually undertook a full review of the events that led up to the flooding events, and a series of actions were committed to. So today provides a bit of an update on some of those actions and where we are. Also reflects on the sort of flood activities earlier this month as well, given it's timely and this was scheduled anyway, but really is an opportunity for you as members to kind of reflect on what we've done, on your own experiences, for us to have a conversation about how we can do hopefully do more to support, our communities at a time of which, unfortunately, we'd like to be seeing more of these events rather than fewer. And as you've said, I am joined by Hilary Tandy, who's the County Council's Flood Risk Manager. And I say this all the time about Hilary, but he's an absolute superstar. And I don't always say that about every County Council colleague. So it's very much a compliment. Thanks, Chris. Can we flick on, please? Excellent. Okay. So this is the background that I've just given, in that there were major flooding events over December 2020 and January 2021, including surface water flooding in the run-up to Christmas, and then a high-risk a river-based flooding incident over Christmas. I was actually the duty officer in charge over the period when I got a phone call alerting us to the risk of 36,000 properties in Huntingdon were at risk of flooding. Such was the concern about the kind of the Great Ooze. Obviously, you've seen this report in advance. The link there is to the original task and finish study that took place at the time, but this is very much an update on the overall process since then. If you click on, please, Chris. The first deliberate mistake in the area is you'll see it says there's 5 actions that we committed to, and actually there's 6 on the following slide. So apologies for that. But what we've got for you today is an update on the 6 actions that we committed to at the time, the update in terms of the 2024 learnings as well, as I've mentioned. But a number of principles have informed the work, both at the time and subsequently. So the first is that at times of difficulty, at times of challenge, nobody cares whose job it is. People just want solutions. And the fact that it is the district council, who has very limited statutory flood authority, sat with the local flood authority in partnership, I think is testament to us trying to unify and join that up. And as those of you who received kind of emails during January, you will be aware that kind of flow chart that we send around is a really easy way for people to find their way through. And for us is the kind of gold standard of what we try and achieve in terms of simple guidance at times of major difficulty for our residents. The second bullet point is, unfortunately, and we do have a climate strategy here in Huntingdonshire, all the indications are we are likely to see a growing number of flood events, and therefore all we can do to stay abreast and on top of flood events is absolutely critical to support our residents in the best way we possibly can. And then the final bullet point there is about the key role that the public and community play in managing activity in these areas. So, of course, we have duties. We will always fulfil those duties. But in what is one of the top 10 biggest council areas in the country, we cannot be looking at every watercourse all the time. And to better inform our residents on what they can do to prevent issues, but how they respond in a timely way when they see an issue, I think is absolutely critical for all of us as we move forward. Because none of us want a phone call at like 11 o'clock to say there's water coming in my house, when actually what we can do at that stage is very, very limited. Whereas actually if we'd known that at 9 o'clock in the morning, often there are things that we can do to help try and alleviate some of those things. And those are the sort of general approach to how we've worked. It does very much tie in with our corporate plan and those principles of there are some things we'll do, but we'll also really look to what we can enable and what we can influence as well, being the kind of key watchstones to our approach to flooding overall. So these are the 6 actions that we committed to on the back of the Task and Finish panel that ran throughout 2021 and involved significant engagement with those communities that had suffered flooding during that period. So the first was around publicising links to flooding advice, to making sure that the advice was well stated, that people were aware of what to do with it. And we did all we can to kind of raise the knowledge of that within our sort of communities and those people that represented them. And the second was a commitment to support the establishment of local flood groups, and we'll give you an update on that later in the presentation. And I'm sure a number of you will vouch for just how effective they can be in bringing together, committed local residents and making a huge difference in terms of safeguarding themselves and their communities. And the next couple of actions are a little bit technical, but largely are sort of planning actions that are being built into our local plan and other activities. So the commitment C there was for a study to be undertaken by a group of technical experts to understand fully the causes of floods. Now, that is a core foundation of our new local plan that's coming forward. That work is underway. The county are fully involved and engaged in that. So we're confident of that overall review of expectations around, flood risk and how we effectively manage that has been picked up. And then item D is for multidisciplinary teams to step in where we have significant concerns or there is a high risk incident. So again, if there's any flooding applications that we think are controversial, that we think will have big impact, we absolutely stand up multidisciplinary teams to review and act on those. Item 3, which I can thankfully confirm has been completed, was a review of wastewater, which was led by Anglia Water. Again, the county and district authority and other key stakeholders were all engaged in that, and that was signed off in May last year. So that's been fully completed and updated. And then the final one, and there's a live demo today. So feel free to be fingers on the buzzers in terms of your area. We can actually sort of zoom in and look at the sort of mapping of this. But we have been inputting into, the county have been leading on an interactive map of local water courses, assigning ownership, so we can act in on that. So there'll be a live demo of that as well. So that's the background to where we got to last time. So just some updates on what has happened since. So in terms of action that we've taken as a district authority, clearly there's been a response to the actions that you've seen there, but there's also been a host of other activities that we've committed to, some of which link to items on the agenda this evening. So there's been changes to national planning guidance around the Environment Act and other things that became law in 2021. And we declared a climate emergency, so recognising the likely increased frequency of these kind of events is a step we've taken. The publishment of the climate strategy. We've commenced the local plan, as I mentioned already, and that surface water flood risk and wastewater plan is a key part of that, which was one of the actions. And we've engaged with the Environment Agency and others, and alternative land management, which is here today. One of the things that can absolutely help with flood alleviation is making sure that water gets more slowly into the water courses and is held in land and through sort of natural kind of water banking, which can be really beneficial as part of this. Now, whilst that's bigger than our alternative land management at the moment, you heard recently about our biodiversity work and other things. These are things that we're expanding our expertise and knowledge in as we move forward. So publicity and promotion, just some examples of things that we've done, but we absolutely recast all our websites to provide better advice. Very much that kind of be ready guidance, so helping point people towards things like pop-up sandbag type things. So actually the evidence for sandbags is pretty marginal in places, but there are kind of self-inflating flood packs that you can buy, sit in the garage on top of a cupboard, that we'd really recommend that if you're in a high-risk area, get them in now. You can buy them from Amazon, and other retailers are available. But really sort of promoting those opportunities to take sensible steps and take some leadership in terms of those kind of areas. If you click on again, please, Chris, a couple of things here. There's some information there in terms of information from the Combined Authority and other areas. We've written out to parish councils on a number of occasions promoting the flood group support that the local flood authority provides, but also highlighting them towards things like grant schemes, where grant schemes come forward. So constantly seeking to make it easy for people to act on in the interest of our residents and our communities wherever we possibly can. And one of the things that was a bit of feedback from the review last time, and Hilary, by all means, introduce it more effectively than I will, but was people said it'd be really useful to have a self-reporting tool to report flood incidents. The county acted on that guidance, and Hilary, by all means, add to what I was saying.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, so on our website, we have now there's a function for reporting flooding and drainage issues. So the one you can see there on the screen to report issues on roads and pavements, so things like blocked gullies or standing water. And then just underneath, where you can't quite see the blue box, there's one for reporting flooding in a property or in somebody's garden. And that was really effective, particularly in January. We received a lot of reports. So,
that's lovely. If you click on... Sorry, and Hilary will take you through a number of these. So again, because this came out in the pack, there's links through here to a range of other documents for those of you who are interested. So if for whatever reason you couldn't access the links, we'll resend these out. But it was just to try and make it easy for you to access. But Hilary will sort of talk through the technical nature of these reports, what they did, and how we use them to inform actions subsequent.
Thank you. Yep. So the ones that are listed there on the slide are where we've undertaken formal flood investigations. So this was where flooding met the threshold set out in our local flood risk management strategy, typically where 5 or more houses are affected. And you can see, in fact, the vast majority of flood investigations on our website are from December 2020 because it was so widespread. And each of those, we've got details about kind of what flooding happened, why it happened, and then a review of the actions that various organisations took during that event, and making sure that they did, what they're supposed to do, or whether they even knew their role and their responsibilities, and then set an action plan in there. So some of the actions in those action plans are already completed, some are in progress, and then some are much longer term where there's investigations required around the status of watercourses and a kind of final outfalls. But what did happen was those reviews then informed an update to our local flood risk management strategy, and that's a document that covers what the County Council is going to do for the next 5 years. And within that, there were 16 key locations that were identified. 10 of those across Cambridgeshire are actually in Huntingdonshire, which I think just reflects the level of risk that you see. And that was adopted in 2022 to cover the next 5 years. And through that, which is the second bullet point on there, is where we're undertaking a review of the risk and possible interventions. So that included a workshop back in December with all water management stakeholders. So we had district councils, we had internal drainage boards, the Environment Agency and the water companies. And what's happening for there is we're reviewing the risk for each location, and then also possible options that could be implemented either by the County Council or by joint partnership working to try and reduce that risk going forwards. That first stage is almost complete, and then the second stage is looking at more detail, so detailed design and the actual feasibility of implementation. But any quick wins that are identified through the first stage of work that we're doing at the moment, we're hoping to actually just get done, because that's the whole point of them, they're quick wins, and we have got a pot of money available for implementation of those. So that's kind of ongoing for those areas. And we've also got, I think I'll talk about it in a little while, there's the role of sensors. There's a lot of telemetry and water level sensors that have been installed across Huntingdonshire, thanks to the council and to Connecting Cambridgeshire. So we've got water level monitors now on, I think it's 30 watercourses across the district, and we're just working with the community flood groups at the moment to make sure that they can access that data and they can do something meaningful with it. So whether it's setting triggers and thresholds to take action, or whether it's just for records and sort of assessing the impact of rainfall. So these are some of the flood groups that we're aware of in Huntingdonshire, and I think it's worth just saying at this point that they're not all the same. Some are very, very much established and formalised, and others are a lot more informal, but they're all nonetheless really effective. An example, which we've got a video hopefully to show you afterwards, is the Alconbury Brook Flood Group. Is an example of a group that's really well established. I think they've got in excess of 100 volunteers now that go out and they help with digging basins, planting trees and doing that kind of thing. And also they've got flood wardens as well to go out into the community during a flood event. But nonetheless, we've also got other groups as well, which might be a small arm of a parish council. It might be a few just keen members of the community, but they're all really important in sort of bringing attention to flooding and getting actions undertaken. So hopefully this video will work, which was part of our community flood action programme. We put some videos together, and this is just to try and demonstrate the importance of community flood groups.
A flood group is really a bunch of like-minded people who are concerned about how the environment is changing, which allows things like the Alconbury Brook here to fill up with water, not get away fast enough, and flood the areas. We are people who are actually directly involved with that because our houses are flooded, our gardens are flooded, our neighbours are flooded.
A flood group is a collective of people with the singular objective of trying to reduce flooding in their area.
The main benefit for myself having a flood group in the village is if there's any problems whatsoever, like branches come down or drains blocked, you've got that first port of call. You know that they will actually get hold of the right agencies.
We're Cambridgeshire County Council area. We've had some funding from them for various things. We clear banks and vegetation from the waterways, and they funded some of our equipment so we can actually get down there when the water's not too high and do the low vegetation.
We've cleared about 3 kilometres of rubbish out of the brook, which lets the water go through. The road will drain water into the brook. So we've got the County Council to come in and clear the drains, which has been great.
The water here wouldn't be flowing like that without the work that we've done. And everyone going out for a walk can see the work that we've done has made a huge difference, and they can actually see that every day.
Yes, hopefully that's just a really good representation of what a few key individuals can do in a community. And that group only started following the flooding in December 2020, and they've established and become sort of that big in that short period of time. Some of the other support we've given to areas, we've helped with the establishment, and we've worked with district colleagues on the flood groups and establishing them and helping. Sometimes somebody might just be interested in setting up a group, but that's all they know. They don't understand flood risk and they need some help. So we've done that. We held a conference. The first one was a couple of years ago in Alconbury. It was fairly modest now. Looking back, we had 40 members of the public turn up for that. And then we held a much bigger scale one this year, just gone in September in St Ives, where we had over 100, maybe even nearer 200 people attend, and we sort of extended that on a region basis. We do offer some flood kit now as well. So for any groups that have established themselves and have an interest, we can give them up to £500 to buy bits of equipment that might be helpful during a flood event. We effectively provide a shopping list and they choose which are most suitable for them. So it might involve things like drain rods, torches, high-vis, whatever they want to do to help. And then also some storage for that, because we found we were providing the kit and then it was staying in somebody's house, which isn't necessarily brilliant in a flood event if they're on holiday. So we've now got storage that we've provided, and there's a picture there on the bottom right, which from the Houghton and Witton flood group, where they store it now and it's accessible to everybody with a combination lock.
So this is a sort of question that I'll leave sort of hanging, and I think as we get into the debate at the end, really. So for anyone who's been to Alconbury and met sort of Charles Daly-Water or spent time with Ian Gardner, will know just how sort of passionately owned this is within the community. And clearly, the issues in Alconbury are long-standing, and not all areas are the same. But I think one of the questions that we'll come on to at the end is, during the recent events in 2024, we saw people kind of parking, their cars, for instance, at times in places that were about to be flooded. In fact, how do we create that kind of, if you see X, do Y type response in some of our communities, and encourage people within those communities to kind of take some local ownership of of that? I think is one of the questions that we're sort of keen to sort of test and explore today. So the final action that we committed to back with the original review was watercourse mapping. So much of this kind of with any watercourse goes back to who owns what, how is it maintained, and what do you do in the event of you've got a concern about something happening in those areas. Now, before we sort of jump in here, some caveats. One of the challenges is particularly being a historic county like Huntingdonshire, where our sort of records go back over 1,000 years, is that land ownership goes back just as far. And often it's a really complex and long-standing issue of trying to understand ownership of things as different organisations have merged and formed and, been overtaken and other things. And it can be a really, really huge job. But when we do it, what's important is we have a single source of the truth that captures all of that knowledge and makes it as easy as possible. So, we've been working sort of hand in hand with the County Council on that. And actually, this is one of the sort of first demos of the work that Hilary and the team have done.
So hopefully this will work, but we have got this is the first sort of outing of the map, really. So what it is the idea is an interactive map, so that people can click on a watercourse and then they can see who is responsible for it. Now, one of the things we weren't able to do is have actual landowners, because you can imagine there's millions and millions of landowners. But what we have done is differentiate between the different types of watercourse. So we've got Main River with the Environment Agency. We've got ordinary watercourses, which are most of the ditches that you see around, which are the responsibility of the landowner. And then something which is fairly niche to the area, which is awarded watercourses, which go back to the 1800s, and that's where the ownership or the maintenance has been awarded to a body. In some cases, it's councils, it could be landowners, it could be the church, it could be anybody. So with the map, hopefully this will work. If whoever has control, if you can sort of click on a green line, at the moment that would come up and tell you that the green line is an ordinary watercourse, and the responsibility for maintaining that would be the riparian owner. So when you click on that, it gives you a little bit more information on the website about, well, what is a riparian owner, because it's a piece of language that we kind of use, but not everybody understands. But it basically means that you have responsibility for maintaining a watercourse, and it talks about that there. And then there's the same sort of information for whether it's a main river or for an awarded watercourse. And yeah, so the link there, we've got some guidance on the website, which is fairly new. It was published in 2022. And we've got printed copies and PDF versions of that to give out to people, which puts in a sort of slightly nicer visual way what they're responsible for, and also help on how to maintain a watercourse, because not everybody knows.
Chris, do you want to go back to the map? So more than happy to do some, the first tab, I think, there you go. So more than happy to do some sort of shout outs on this, and for anyone to sort of declare their area, we can have a look. But I think one of the things that I'm always struck by is as soon as the sort of the weather turns grim and we're into flood season, suddenly my inbox fills up with people saying, what about this watercourse or that watercourse? Now, of course, we can, and it's normally Matt actually at the back, so it's him you've got to thank, is dispatched down to the archives to start studying kind of vellum scrolls to work out, actually who owns it. But the nice thing here is it enables us to get proactive. So, actually to be looking proactively in your communities and saying, actually, there isn't clear who owns this bit of watercourse. Can I flag it? Can we have a look into it? And to start to get those things, ahead of the curve. And I'm sure in your communities, you'll be aware of some watercourses that are looking a bit overgrown, or you pass it, or somebody's raised something with you. It'd be a really easy job just to have a look on here and see who the owner is. So again, we'll come to some ideas at the end, but we're already talking through what can we do to remind people of their responsibilities, to remind people to have a look in terms of the status of some of these areas, but doing this while the sun shines rather than waiting till that kind of November, December period, where it's very, very tricky to get the answers and the action in the time, the timescales that people want. So is there anyone who's particularly interested in having a look at their patch? Simon? You should have a look at Wood Walton. So if you just go to the top right-hand corner, Chris, where it says address or postcode at the top. There you go. Type in. Just type in Wood Walton. It should work. Will that work?
Should, yeah.
Yeah. It's all one word. Yeah. And if you just zoom out a bit. So it actually looks like reasonable coverage there. Councillor Bywater?
Getting carried away. Yeah, this is great. Thank you. We speak on a regular basis. I refer to Wood Walton because this is the second time in 3 years that properties have flooded, and the issue is about riparian responsibilities, where we actually know who owns most of the land. It's getting them to do the work, and we talked to the last paragraph talks about the relevant acts and bylaws that it's about enforcing and holding people accountable to do the work. And I'm not going to name and shame people in a public meeting of who's not really pulling their weight, but I think we need to be better at it as a county and as a district to put pressure on those people, because it's a multifaceted problem within Wood Walton. There's no rivers there. It's all to do with ditches and drains that just need basic maintenance, really. And if one piece of that jigsaw puzzle is not working, then properties flood. So I think for me, this is all great. We've come on a really good journey, and it's I tip my hat to everybody who's been involved in it. I just think we need to get better at just when we need to put that fist on somebody, really just to say, right, it's the summer now, let's get these ditches dug out, really. So that's my plea, really.
Thank you. I completely agree. And actually, we've got an updated watercourse enforcement policy going through the county in March. So that's been drafted up and that's had legal review. So we're just waiting for the sign off. And that sets out the absolute process and makes it very, very clear that we will try nicely to start with, but then it takes you down various avenues, ultimately through the courts if we need to.
Chair, can I just quickly come back on that? And yes, that's really good to hear. I think sometimes as well the defence is particularly I'm thinking about Glatton now, where we've discovered that there's lots of attenuation ponds that are in the topper end of the villages which haven't seen maintenance since the Second World War. And the defence that I get when I challenge local residents as part of, let's get some work done is, we can't afford to dig all these out. How can we get grant funding? Who can support us, really? And I think that's a message that I can help signpost people for, really. And that's my plea, really, is being able to signpost people to the relevant grants and support that, they want to do something, but potentially can't afford to do it, really. So.
Thank you. That's really helpful. We'll certainly come back to that. Okay, so if you go back to the presentation, Chris. Thank you. Next slide. There's two more, I think, actually. Next one. Fine. So some statements of the obvious here, but just in terms of, how do we support this mapping work? So we've got a great platform here that will be really useful. And I think particularly in terms of some of the points that Councillor Bywater's made, that opportunity to kind of automate things. So automatically send a letter, to remind people of what their duties are, to very quickly identify who is the owner when there's an issue, those kind of things, I think will be absolutely critical for us moving forward. And I'm sure we'll pick that up in debate. So a single source of the truth. This will always be an ongoing process. I think that's the nature of it. And I think particularly as flood behaviours kind of change and as we see different things, it may move. We might see things in different areas. We were talking only today about some watercourses being designated as major rivers and taken over by the EA because of some of those things. So, this will continue to evolve and change. And tracking that information, as I've mentioned, is no laughing matter. It's not an easy sort of process. And one of the things that we're exploring is what we could do to make that a bit more democratic. So, there's been instances recently where people have flagged things with me in good faith. We think this is the council. We've gone and looked into it. Actually, it's a parish responsibility. Now, we don't have all of the, we're not resourced to deliver. This is not a statutory function. Exploring in some areas, what could we do to build the capacity and expertise for other people to go and do those things? So that could be the parish themselves, it could be the clerk, it could be someone else. But actually making this a more democratic process, that if you can come back and show this, we'll absolutely update the map and do exactly what we do, which is we go and read the documents, we take photos of them, we interpret them, we pass them to Hilary, and Hilary loads them up onto the site. Can you click on, please, Chris? So very quickly, and this is just a couple of slides here, but really given it's very topical at the moment, I'm sure the public would be interested. Thought it was just useful to give a bit of a sort of recap of the flood events of early last month. So it was an emergency response on the back of Storm Henk. So we heard on the 2nd of January there were concerns that were held. For those of you who don't know, there is something called the Local Resilience Forum. So it's under some national duty, but priority one responders, of which is district councils, one will be called together in the event of something that's likely to have a major impact. So there was a group call, we were all pulled together. And as it was, actually, the overall impact was relatively minor. Very few sort of houses affected, sort of thankfully. But there was an escalation process and concerns around, the U's flooding and a sort of period of peak going through. So that's what happened. Chris, if you click on again, please. What we did, and I guess really the question for you as members is how did we do, not what did we do, but this is what we did. So communications went out to members and the public. That kind of single source of the truth was something that we absolutely did. That built on what we'd done in 2020. I think what we did in addition was much more public communications, so much more use of the press office, much more use of social media than we have done historically, which seems to have landed well, but I'll let you be the judges of that. There was an excellent response from the community flood groups, and what we absolutely saw was two-way engagement, with the flood groups and then escalating things to us. So in Buckton, for instance, one of the sites we went out to, there was concerns about a culvert. We had a contractor out there at 5:30 at night. The water was flowing again by 6 o'clock and alleviated what had become a big flood across a road. Matt and Andy and the team went out to Ramsey to see some concerns that we had there. But those relationships that we've established over recent years really kind of played through. And the multi-agency approach and discussions in that area were incredibly helpful. There were some things that weren't quite so good. So again, when I was on call in 2020, one of the private care homes in St Neots was a major concern for all of the local agencies because their electrical supply is on the ground floor within the floodplain. 4 years later, it's still on the ground floor in the floodplain. So, the fire brigade spent, 24 to 36 hours there pumping water away to keep vulnerable people sort of resolved in those areas. So there are things like that where we need to act on it. But there were a number of lessons learned from the previous event. Okay, so this is where we start to get into some of the thoughts that we've had in terms of reflections on where we've been historically, but also the events of 2024. So how do we continue to support that community role? So we've talked about flood groups, we've talked about, with the best will in the world, we've got 550 really, really dedicated staff as a district council. We can't be everywhere all the time, and we have got to have that kind of partnership relationship with our communities and residents. So one of the things that has worked well in certain areas is testing an appetite to kind of empower our residents to do certain things. So one of the points, and I'll come on to it a couple of times, is that when you see X, do Y. So if you hear there's a flood alert, for instance, whether the water, the water courses are, your area, go and have a look at the culverts. And if you've got an issue, tell someone. So starting to build that expectation of, the first line of defense is you. Go out and have a look. Tell us in plenty of time, because one of my concerns with the events earlier this year was we got flood warnings going out at 4:30 when it was starting to get dark. That's the nightmare scenario, really. Ideally, you want to know when it's still light and people can still act. But those kind of areas of what can people do. The other thing is, clearly, as statutory organisations, we have statutory powers. There are things we can do. We can close roads, for instance. But often at times when resources are really stretched, what that can mean is there's no sign saying a road should be closed at a time in which there's water in the road. And with the flood groups and that Hilary and the team have done, is given kind of warning flood signs out to communities. We've discussed what we could do about potentially giving to people who, live around roads that are regularly flooded, a sign that could sit at the end of the garden or the edge of their garage or whatever, and they go and put it up. It's not a statutory sign. It doesn't close the road, but it does alert people, don't drive into it, because it's likely to end badly for you and everyone else. And if in addition to that, they ran the highways team and said, just to let you know, I've deployed the advisory sign. Could you come out and do something more formal to actually close the road? Would prevent harm in a sensible way, and prevent that kind of bottleneck of busy teams ferrying everywhere at a time which they're already really well pressed. So that enhanced support for the community role. Sorry, Hilary, did you want to come in there? No. So I've talked about sort of checking water courses and what we can do there. Again, one of the things that we've explored is an appetite sort of more collectively across public sector agencies, potentially to support a kind of some campaigning, so some publicity around that, of raising the profile, having those conversations. I understand at times that could be controversial, so really interested in your thoughts in that, of how we support people to do that. And then another area is some of you, particularly any twin hatters we have in the room, I think we have at least one, we'll know at the County Council there is investment in some of the highways and other activity at the County Council. One of the things that we've picked up in areas like Buckton historically is Matt and the team will do a fantastic job on street cleansing. So we go down the street, we cleanse the streets, but if we then sweep dirt inadvertently into a gully after the gully has been cleared, what we're actually starting to do is create a bigger problem rather than solve it. So with the additional money going into the kind of highways budget at the County Council, we're exploring conversations around more sensible multidisciplinary activity around some of those kind of factors. So we at the District Council already have enhanced cleaning in some of our high-risk flood areas to make sure, for instance, we are sweeping under cars and that kind of thing to reduce that risk. But is there a step further we can go in terms of sequenced activity with the County Council, or potentially, and this is a thought at this stage, exploring whether it would make more sense for us to do it so we can align it with our timelines in those kind of areas. And then the final bullet point there is exploring sort of appetites around stronger enforcement. So we all know, we've all seen at times people filling culverts, filling ditches and those kind of areas. Now, the first thing, and it goes back to the first point, is if the community alerts us to that, we can act upon it. And reminding people of their duties and responsibilities is really important, but we can only do that if we know that's happened. But one of the things we could do is invest some time and resource as well in more stringent activity in those areas. To go back to a point that Councillor Bywater made, and the reason that knowledge of ownership is so important is we've been talking about, we're very happy to send out reminders, to remind people of their duties, but we are able to step in and actually do the work and recharge people. Now, there is a degree of risk there that we need to make sure that we get the money back and we're not subsidising kind of lacklustre people. But I think they are things as well that we could, we could look to act on if necessary in certain areas. If you click on, please, Chris. And these are some sort of technical reviews which you've seen in the report because it's been shared with all of you. But these are some of the specific kind of more technical recommendations that we're taking back out of the local resilience forum work in the events of 2020. So reviewing various plans and doing various other things. These are fairly routine after any sort of major incident. But I won't dwell too long there. If you click on, please, Chris. Which brings us to your feedback and reflections, and hopefully that hasn't been too dull as we've taken you through quite a sweep of information there.
So has anyone any questions or any comments to make? Councillor Lowe.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to say the response was fantastic. It really helped me to liaise with Broughton and Wistow, who both flooded. But there is an issue with a blocked culvert in Broughton. You're aware of that, are you? Oh right, okay. No, who would we report all of those to get them sorted, and who would we contact to get the roads cleaned afterwards?
So that would be, excuse me, that would be my team to report the culvert to. So we can do that, and then I can subsequently speak to Highways and ask them about making sure that the drainage is cleared. So I'll just need to double check the exact location with you afterwards, if that's okay.
And Councillor Lowe, in terms of kind of street cleansing, if there's dirt and detritus on the road, we make every effort in through our street cleansing team to get out and address those. So if there are issues or there are areas that have been left, if you let us know, we can put it on the regular list of areas we check after flooding events going forward as well.
Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, and I can echo Councillor Lowe's comments about the response kind of earlier this year. I think Huntingdon East got away quite lucky. Myself and Councillor Harvey were not made aware of anyone going under, but the information we got was absolutely vital, what we were able to pass on to residents. One point on comms, I know and the whole kind of attitude of if X do Y. I know a lot of other councillors I was in contact with during the flooding were essentially, the minute there was a flood warning issued, were then inundated with requests for sandbags and this and that, which we cannot magic out of thin air. And realistically, the time to buy those things is 6 months in advance. And so what can we do kind of to encourage residents to actually take that proactive step and a bit of responsibility and kind of support them to kind of prepare?
It's a really good question. So I can tell you what we've tried. So what we've tried is very much that kind of engagement with communities, do things like community flood groups and encouraging people to kind of, to take those steps and to have those conversations. And one of the areas that always, that sort of shone through for me sort of post the events of 2020 was Houghton and Witton that really did do an awful lot in those kind of areas. So I think some of it is just talk about it, raise the profile, have those conversations. As Councillor Bywater, will let people know those areas that have been flooded, the impact on your insurance premiums and other things are dramatic. Take sensible steps, in advance. And I think signposting to reputable sites where they access those things are really important too. But more than willing to listen to any other ideas that others have got. The other thing that we have offered at times, post 2020, which there was very little take up of, is a ton of sand isn't that expensive. We're more than happy to go and speak to to a firm and get a ton of sand dropped at a parish centre or something else. Or the parishes do it themselves, and they could sit behind your parish hall until they're needed. Get some bags. The evidence is a bit patchy on sandbags, but if you've got a community that's really passionate about it and want to fill some sandbags, actually there are ways of doing it. One of the challenges with sandbags often is disposing of them afterwards, particularly if there's been sort of foul water around and that kind of stuff, which is just an area of risk. But we're open to all ideas, is what I'm saying. And I think there are some creative solutions in certain areas. But, I think the flood activity, and I know I speak to Councillor Keane, who did a lot of the work in Houghton, can be a really community building activity in and of itself, of bringing people together, creating a sense of interest. And, that's probably got quite a value as well.
Councillor Lowe.
Just thinking, you've got the Internal Drainage Board and the Mid-Level Commissioners, because I know with the farmers involved with those, they can help with some clearance, because I'm on the Warboys, Summersham and Pidley one, and I was able to contact farmers who were able to help with some of the areas that were flooding, which was fantastic. I don't know whether everybody knows about the Internal Drainage Board or even the Mid-Level Commissioners. I think they'd be good to get on the planning list as well, consultation list.
So we have one of the other new things we've just instigated is a community newsletter, and the first one is due out any time now, and we'll need some help in spreading it far and wide once it's out. But that's just a 2-page kind of newsletter aimed at members of the community to learn more about flooding, and part of it will spotlight on a different organisation each time. So yeah, perhaps the IDBs could be one of the first ones in that we do, because I think unless you live in an active IDB area, you might not know they exist. So I think that's a really good idea.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Orban.
Thank you, Chair. It was quite interesting. One of the things you touched on earlier on was about what I refer to as the micro problems. As Councillor Bywater mentioned, the major problems, we know where some of the organisations are that we need to approach. One of the things I had, not this last recent problems, but a couple of years ago, were estates where building had taken place in the 60s and 70s away from, I think the nearest river to me is right at the edge of my ward where it borders Ramsey. A lot of my ward doesn't have rivers, but it's little brooks where one neighbour has covered it over, put something on, and the knock-on effect to other neighbours. How is the best way we can work on a multi-agency approach to tackle those delicate neighbourhood situations that do need attacking, because the problems they can cause can still be significant?
So I'm sure Hilary will have something to contribute, but I think some of it is shining a light on these areas, of reporting them and flagging the issue. I'm acutely aware, and I remember Neil Sloper, who many of you know, having a case like this that basically filled his inbox for 18 months. It just would not. It was a problem that just would not resolve itself. So we do come across them from time to time. But I think firstly, flag it up, report it in. We can have some conversations in those areas, to try and get to encourage neighbours to have conversations with neighbours as well. I think is a really important thing, because what I have seen in some of these areas is really damaged relationships afterwards. And the best starting point is always some sort of negotiated, discussed solution to these things, as much as we possibly can. But ultimately, we do have enforcement powers. And I think one of the things in terms of riparian rights, and Hilary will step in and undoubtedly correct me, I'm sure. But as a starting point, if you own the land that runs to the water, in all likelihood, all else being equal, it's your responsibility to keep that clear. And I think at times we talk about flooding being really, really complex and difficult, but that's a pretty good starting point. And some of these things, when you look over people's back fences, often what you find is things that have been tipped over years and years and years. Well, actually, that's for you to pick up. So you try and broker those conversations, report it in, we'll step in if it can be required. But there often isn't an easy fix, but we will use enforcement powers if we need to.
Yeah, I think one of the things we've got that we're aware of anyway, there's 8,000 miles of watercourse just in Cambridgeshire. So, and that's not all of it. I'm sure that there's hundreds more ditches over than that. So one of the key things we can do is learn where they are, and then share with us where those blockages might be. And that might be a site visit from somebody in the team. But what we have found is community flood groups, again, in these locations we've got them, have been really effective, because we can work with them, and they are sort of seen as a less heavy-handed approach to when they might go right to residents or knock on their door, rather than a council officer coming in with a sort of enforcement letter. We have had a few locations where parish councils have taken, we've got rafts of leaflets at the office and they've gone and done letter dropping. Because I think in many cases, a lot of people just don't know that they have the responsibility to keep it clear. And it's all around that awareness raising. And we're quite keen to do that as much as possible. And like I think Ollie said, any ideas around that, just to raise awareness so we can help them.
Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you so much for the presentation, and thank you, Hilary, for the work you do. It really does make a difference. I absolutely echo what Oliver says. You have done an amazing job in working with the groups in the area and empowering them. Thank you. Yes. So moving on to item 6, business rates discretionary rate relief policy. We'll be invited to give comments on the this item after a small presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Those of you with even quite short memories will realise that we've reviewed this paper only April last year, and I commented then that Zoe had done a fantastic job, I think, in explaining what's quite a difficult concept, and probably one of the most misunderstood things about being a district councillor is lots of businesses are obviously struggling at the moment, and lots of people expect that we can give discretionary rate relief to rescue those businesses. But simple math should show that that rates are a contributing factor to our income, but most of the business rates go to the government, and for us to subsidise the tax bills of private companies is obviously a very difficult decision to take and should only be taken in the most exceptional circumstances and for a short amount of time. And this policy, as the last policy did, is a really good description of that. The reason it's in front of you tonight is there's been some legislative changes that mean that we have to look at it again. They're relatively minor, but I think Zoe and the team have taken the opportunity to go through it once again. I think it's an even better explanation of the conditions under which we can offer rate relief and how long for as well. So hopefully any businesses who are watching this and struggling should look through this, because where applicable, businesses should absolutely be applying for relief, but it's not something we can generally apply to everybody. So unless, Zoe, do you have anything to say? Or
I think you've more or less covered it. It's basically there has been some legislative changes. So we were required to actually look at the policy again and insert some discretionary measures for backdating of reliefs, as sort of explained in the impacts. Took the opportunity whilst looking at the policy to make it more user-friendly so businesses could know what to expect when applying for discretionary rate relief. You'll also note that we have looked at the cap on Section 49 relief so that it mirrors neighbouring authorities, so that businesses again could know what to expect when they're actually applying for hardship relief. That's about it. So hopefully I'll open if there's any questions, but that's about it.
I've got a comment more than a question. You have improved it, and it is a lot more user friendly. It was already good, but it's even better now. And I thought it was a brilliant policy. Thank you. Anyone got comments or questions? In that case, thank you very much. So moving on to item 7, the update on the alternative land management. We've got Councillor Davenport, Ray and Matthew.
Thank you. I'm back again to talk about biodiversity again. Last time I was calling from America, but now I'm in person. And I just wanted to say that it's 1 year since our council recognized the climate crisis and the biodiversity, the ecological emergency. And I think it's the second half of that recognition that we should be really proud how strongly our council has responded to that second half, the ecological emergency. And like I mentioned last time, there's sort of 4 different areas that are all happening at the same time. So last time I was here talking about biodiversity on strategic sites owned by HDC. And then we have the Community Biodiversity Grant Scheme, which is currently reviewing different expressions of interest. For example, I know Sawtree has expressed interest in a very interesting idea for a woodland. And so that's going on at the same time. The third area is local nature recovery, which is funded by DEFRA. And that was the session we had online a few days ago from the County Council team that are working on it. And I do have a recording of that I'll be able to share later this week with everyone else who couldn't join us. And so the fourth element of that biodiversity work is what we're here to talk about today: alternative land management. So a project within our own operational team that's funded in our operational budget. And a few months ago, we came to tell you about the scheme, and we promised to come back and give you an update, and that's why Matt and I are here today. So, a bit of a timeline. And we had a similar timeline last time, but this is an update. So in April of 2023, so last spring, it was quite a wet spring, and so the first amenity grass cut happened in April. And then in May, our alternative land management website went live, and residents started to see the signs appearing around the district that said, "Why the long grass?" In June, we had a parish forum where all parish councillors were invited, and Matt had a stall to be able to tell them more about the scheme. Then throughout the summer and the autumn, there were ongoing conversations with towns and parishes. There was a dedicated email inbox if people wanted to feedback or ask for changes. In total, we received 16 emails into that inbox from 9 individuals. And then also in the summer and the autumn, we made changes based on feedback. And so I've listed one there. So Needingworth Parish Council decided that they did not want to have any long grass, so it was mowed. But then at the same time, we received complaints from residents of Needingworth who had enjoyed the long grass and were very sorry to see it go. So I think this represents sort of the balance of opinion in a lot of our villages, which, you know, I think that we sort of expected that there would be a difference of opinion, and we need to find a balance for it. So, new things that have happened. In September, ecologists visited not all of the sites, because there are many, but they visited, is it about 30 sites, Matt?
Sample 30.
Yeah, so a sample of the sites, so 30. And they assessed what the plant life and the invertebrate life was like on those sites. And I've put a quote there in yellow of the main conclusion of the ecological team that visited. So they said, just one season's worth of growth has made a significant difference to the sites, both in terms of floral diversity and the numbers and types of invertebrates that are found. This was, to me, even more successful than I thought. I wasn't expecting that level of feedback. October 2023 was the first amenity grass cut of the winter, so that means even the areas that were long grass were cut at that point. January 2024, we've missed it by one day, Matt. That was when we promised to come back and give you an update, so we're here today on the 1st of February. And so our project webpage will go live with the survey results as well. So residents that live in any of the areas that were the 30 sample areas can see exactly what the results were that were found near them. Then the yellow at the top at the end is, in the photo you can see our signs from last year. We're thinking about different versions of the sign, things that might be more robust, so they last throughout more of the growing season. And the first amenity grass cut will be this spring, timing dependent on how wet the grass is. So why did we do any of this? Our corporate plan has goals about improving our environment and recovering nature. We have a climate strategy that links into a lot of this work. And then Biodiversity for All is the project that's funded by the Combined Authority, half of which I spoke to you about last time. So they're all drivers that all link together to improve nature in Huntingdonshire. So, as I said, there are lots of sites. There were 232 sites where we had signs. We created a web page. We engaged ecologists to sample 30 of the sites and actually measure the changes that had happened. And here are a few photos by a Keene Stukely Meadows resident at one of the long grass sites. So some of the residents have been sending in their photos of the long grass and what they found. So in terms of plant life, 156 unique species were found across 26 sites. And in general, Wigmore Farm in Godmanchester was the most diverse, so it had the most number of unique plants. So if you think about somewhere like Wigmore Farm, part of the space was left along grass and part was mown. And so the ecologists were able to determine that the part that was mowed had 9 unique plant species, and the part that was left along grass had 55 unique plant species. And there's more photographs that were taken by the ecologists there of an example of a mushroom. So I love graphs. I'm sorry, I had to make a graph. This is the number of unique species. So for example, if we look at the first one, Alwyn Close, the blue would indicate how many unique species were found on the part of the site that was mowed, and then the green is the number of unique species that were found in the long grass. And so you can see the trend. The areas with long grass had more plant species than those that didn't. And in some cases, we didn't have a comparison that we were able to make. So in some areas, all of it was long grass, so there is no blue bar for that part of the chart. Okay, invertebrates. So first of all, what is an invertebrate? To make it easy, think about spiders, insects, toads. Those are the kind of things we're talking about. Across 26 sites, 92 species were recorded, and Hazelwood Walk in Huntingdon was the most diverse. On that particular site, 5 species were found on the mown areas, and 53 species were found in the long grass. Also, I mentioned that while the ecologists were on site, they observed some other things that are not invertebrates, birds, mammals, amphibians. So there are other things happening there. And then you have some more photos. The toad at the top was found in Love's Farm in the long grass. And then you have spider from Stukely Meadows. I forget what the other one is called, Matt. A footballer hoverfly. I haven't seen that in person. So this graph is similar to the others, but this is all about the invertebrates. So how many spiders and other things were found? Again, you can see there's a clear increase in the number, not increase. There are more unique species of invertebrates in the long grass than there are in the mown grass. So we thought it might be easier to understand with a few case studies. So this is Erith. And so the ecologists visited, gave the site a baseline score, and then measured to see what they could find. And they found 39 plants, 36 invertebrates, and they also gave us some text notes, and we thought you might be interested to see some of the things the ecologists were feeding back. So the first says, a local resident gave negative feedback of the area, stating it looked messy and left less room for children to play. While surveying the site, a child was noted to be playing in the area and cycling on the hard-standing pathways only. It is recommended that the site is managed as per the management matrix table. We'll talk a little bit later about management. The arisings, so the cuttings, could be left on site in a discrete pile close to the hedgerow to provide additional refugia, multiple refuges for wildlife and preserving invertebrate eggs that may have been laid in the long vegetation over summer. So this is again giving you a mixture of the positives and the negatives of undertaking this type of work, and also examples of what was found on this particular site. So you can see the brown Argus butterfly at the top that was found in Erith. So in Brampton, another good example, 26 plants, 44 invertebrates found, and this was the feedback from the ecologists who visited the site. A local couple living opposite the site were interested in what we were doing and seeking advice for their own garden. They thought the ALM areas were a positive thing and were trying to achieve a similar outcome in their own gardens through seeding with wildflowers. They also provided anecdotal evidence of muntjac deer, cuckoo, and green woodpecker in the area. And so these are photos that are actually from that particular site in Brampton. One more, Wigmore Farm. 64 different species of flora, so quite a big variety of what could be found. And so from the background picture, you can get an idea of what we were trying to accomplish with a route for dog walkers to enjoy, people who are trying to travel across the space, but still leaving lots of long grass for nature to thrive. And we weren't just measuring flowers and grass. You can see in the top left is an interesting form of lichen that was recorded by the ecologists. And in the bottom right, invertebrate burrows in the ground, so signs that invertebrates had been there. So this diagram outlines how the ecologists who visit it recommend that we attempt to maintain sites in future that are semi-urban, what a lot of our villages and communities look like. So if you have a roadway or a footpath that closest to it, you cut the swathes low because the wildlife value is limited. You have an area, Zone B, that's a shorter meadow with wildflowers. Zone C that has taller herbs and feeds and seeds that animals can feed on. And then beyond that, more of a hedgerow, larger, thicker vegetation that can include nesting cover. This is a really good example in practice. So you have the footpath, the mown area, and then it's gradually increasing in sward height until you get to the hedgerow. So again, here are the conclusions of the ecologist. It's evident in many cases that just one season's worth of growing has made a significant difference, both in terms of floral diversity and numbers of invertebrates. One of the key factors is being able to increase biodiversity within an area is through creating as much structural diversity as possible. So what that means is just having different heights of grass. Not all long, not all short. The variety of height is perhaps what the wildlife is looking for. This is my favorite resident photo that was sent in during the scheme from Stukely Meadows. So feedback in general from residents and from local councillors. 5 of the sites were amended. So I mentioned the one that was mown completely, but mostly it was more of a changing the shape or size a little bit to reflect how people wanted to use the space. Again, we had 16 emails from 9 different individuals on the ALM mailbox. We do note that some of the signs did not last throughout the mowing season or were found nearby and replaced. So that's definitely a point that we want to work on differently in the year to come, something that's more robust in the signs. So we also did some, Matt and his team did measuring about the litter picking that they did before and the litter picking that they did after. They did not find that it increased. The residents didn't report losing any pets or relatives. The potential health and safety issues were not raised with the team. Neither was an increase in dog fouling. So we see that as positive because we know that there were worries about that before the scheme began. So what happens next? Our plan for 2024 is no increase in sites, but we do have a few different changes to the shapes and sizes of sites. Matt and I had a walk around Love's Farm this week to talk about ways that things could be mown differently, perhaps moving the long grass to the edges rather than the center or the other way around, so that people can play football in the areas they like to play football. And looking further into the future, the idea is eventually to merge this into the Biodiversity for All project as well, so to have both working more closely together. So in 2024, after this summer's long grass, we'll be able to use our own staff to survey the sites because as a council, we now employ 2 graduate ecologists. They're excellent. In fact, if they were here tonight, I'm sure they would say to you, please download the app that's called iNaturalist and help them record all of the nature around our district. You can use it to take a photo of something you see, it will identify it, and then it will record it, a specific location on the planet so we know what our nature looks like. In June 2024, the parish forum will happen again. Matt will be there again to answer any parish councillors' questions. And then the conversation with towns and parishes goes on. So the last thing I would leave you with is a plea from me for your help. Please do share this element of the website with your communities, because this is where they'll be able to see the survey results of the exact plants and animals that were found in the sample sites near them, and they can go and visit the site and see for themselves during this summer some of those plants and animals. That's all I've brought today. And that's our update on alternative land management, and Matt is here to help me answer questions, which I'm sure you might have.
Thank you, Councillor Davenport-Ray. I mean, I am so excited, and this report was brilliant. I can't tell you, it just brings me joy, even looking at the pictures again now. Absolutely brilliant, and I'm so excited by it. So, anyone got any comments or questions? Councillor Bywater.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. Very good report. Thank you. We've waited for a while for it, but the detail's been really good, and I'll hold my hands up. I'm surprised on some of the information. So well done. Particular thanks to Matt as well. I think for me, in the areas that I represent, is we talked about having those pathways through certain areas. I think they're key. Really, I think they're really helpful. People appreciate that. I'd like if you could share the iNature thing. That's really I'm intrigued to share that with people. And you say about sharing stuff. If there's something we can put out on our local Facebook pages, that I'm all up for that. So if you can signpost us or give us something that we can do, then I'm happy to do that. I think we did have some stumbling problems right at the beginning, didn't we? And I think the county council's policy about not spraying weeds became sort of mixed up in it all really when the weeds hit a peak in the middle of the summer. But it sounds like that they've decided to change their policy, and so hopefully we won't have that problem again. But no, good bit of work actually. So well done. Thank you.
Councillor McAdam.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm pretty much echoing Councillor Bywater's comments. Really, I'm very pleased and a bit surprised as well, actually, at the pleasantly surprised at the outcome of what's been achieved by this. I do think communications with the public and kind of education is key to helping it go forward better in the future. I know initially when we started this, I had some rather cynical comments given to me as, oh, council's just trying to save money, we won't cut the grass, so, save us money. I've had to convince people, no, that's not the case. It's actually because we care about the environment that you live in, So, yeah, and I will certainly do everything I can to share any messages you put out on social media or whatever, and I'll promote it to my town council as well. Thank you.
Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, and I'm going to echo what my two colleagues said, because again, I think this is absolutely brilliant, and I think my thoughts on this overall. I think the question I have is, what's the long-term future for this? Because I know this is still technically a trial, and I know there's no new sites planned for this year, but I'm not going to try and get you to predict the future. But what about 2025? What's the long-term future you see for this?
Yeah, I mean, long-term future, the idea of this year is just to test the theory on the management instructions and guidance we've been given from the ecologists. So let's see if that does work, mowing it that way, leaving some horizons on sites. I think there's still some work to do with communication with the parishes that we can learn from before. And certainly, I appreciate the fact that this went ahead and it was supported by members, because I know it would have attracted extra work and email traffic from residents for yourselves. But this year's about, let's test the theory again. Let's see that when we go back and the ecologists, our in-house ecologists, are going to survey the same sites exactly the same way. They've been given this report. They know how it was been done. And let's see, is it increasing? Is it decreasing? Are there other species coming on board where we might need to tweak the management plans again? Because, if they're an endangered species, there could be a specific way. They might want to expand that site or whatever. So I think from there, I think it will be back. We'll bring the report back. We'll also be with the Biodiversity for All team, so we can start pulling all these projects together and saying, what does biodiversity mean in Huntingdonshire, and where do we want to go with it? And then from there, I think it will be decisions that we'll get to take advice of the ecologists or what could happen next. I mean, certainly there is scope for doing more of this if parishes want it. We have had a couple of parishes, so although we've said we're not looking to expand it this year and we just want to sort of have a period of settling in and seeing what happens, there are a couple of parishes that are asking to come on board with this, and we'll definitely look at doing that in season. But going forward, we'll take the advice of the ecologists, we'll bring it back to members, and we'll discuss options. I think there are other sites that could be used, but it needs to be done in a way which, again, is thoughtful about the residents' needs, the use of that part of the open space.
I think going forward, one of our biggest challenges is going to be just the richness of the diversity that is developed. So in the past, this would have been 200 sites that were mown as grass and mowed regularly as grass. And as the site returns to nature slightly, we realize just how unique all the sites are. So some of the feedback from the ecologists is, yes, this used to be a mown grass area, but it's close to a waterway, and you should need to think about it as a riparian habitat rather than a grass habitat. Whereas 10 other sites, maybe we should be managing in different ways. And so that's a real challenge for the future of, we used to just have lots of grass sites, we mowed several times a year, and that was the management plan. We might need to have more unique responses to each site.
Councillor Lowe.
Thank you. I was just wondering, you were saying that you're not expanding the area. Have you got any suggestions for parish councils to start doing their own sort of alternative land management bits? Because I know there's small sections of road verges which seem to be the particular ones that people have been asking about.
So there is a project within the Biodiversity for All team where they're looking at grants, issuing grants to parishes to do things on their own land, and so that the ecologists are able to go out and have been actively going out as part of that project and talking to parishes about that. I think it was actually on our social media site that the first grant had been submitted and given and signed off. I think that was Huntingdon Town Council, if I remember rightly. It's not my project, but I'll try and keep tabs on it, so bear with me. And I think there's another tranche of funding coming out shortly. I think that's what it said on social media, so parishes will be able to apply, and I encourage them to do so. If they want to look at alternative land management, I mean, obviously they can contact us and we're happy to advise them on how we went about it. So more than happy to be part of that.
So I guess I would put that in perspective with an example. So we had a town council apply for that small grant scheme, and they have a cemetery. It's not an active cemetery, but they put it forward as perhaps we could do some ecological enhancement here. And so our in-house ecologist visited, gave them a couple of options, what they thought could be accomplished, and then they applied for an award of the funding in order to undertake that work. So it needs to be an organization that's prepared to be do the maintenance going on, but they could receive a grant and advice on how to start. So yes, that's on our social media channels, a community biodiversity grant.
Councillor Alban.
Thank you, Chair. I think what we've learned looking back on last year is the need for flexibility, and it's been really good looking at the slides that came up about adapting things and in the light of evidence. I would agree with colleagues that I think this is really positive. I think we're responding, we're listening to residents, we're coming up with ideas and presenting them and inviting opinions. I probably spend far too much time on Facebook. I'm probably not the only one. But one of the things, every now and again, this picture comes up that's allegedly from Rotherham about them putting planters in the middle of the dual carriageway full of flowers. I say, why aren't our councils doing that? Well, I thought, well, Huntingdonshire has been doing a variation of that for 3 or 4 years with the rewilding, and I think, without being too boastful, Huntingdonshire can hold its own against a lot of other councils. We've got this balance to strike, which I think we strike pretty well, thinking about some of the Victorian municipal parks like Central Park in Peterborough, the manicured areas, and the desire to keep those, but also the desire from residents to have something that does promote biodiversity. And I think all of us collectively, councillors and officers, we're heading in the right direction.
It makes me very happy to hear that from you. And I suppose my ask would be to think about our climate action plan is we're going to do things, we're going to enable people to do things, and then we're going to influence people. So happily, if you feel like we've accomplished good things, I would ask you all to go away and encourage everyone else to do it. Because I would love to see things happening on the side of highways. So we encounter people from the Highways Authority and from Highways England that were making that point, and the other authorities that we're involved with, and other private organizations we're involved with, using us as an example to try to influence the other people that we meet as we move around our district.
I can't claim credit for this because it was Councillor Shaw that I think came up with this at an environment task and finish group, saying about the idea of putting plants or grass on top of bus shelters and encouraging bees. So there's lots of ideas within this panel, let alone within the council. And I think this does go back to flexibility. It's like on the entrance to Stilton. I'm not going to turn this into a ward surgery, but there's a junction where the B1043 goes over the motorway, and some people complain because they can't see when they come out of the junction to turn, and other people, so the grass was cut back, and other people complain then that the grass was cut back. And I think going back to the slide that was up there, this idea of a graduated thing that allows good vision, it allows good road safety, it allows us to work with the county council to fulfil that, but also to increase biodiversity. It doesn't have to be one thing or another. I think it's like a lot of things in life. There's sometimes a middle ground, and I think if it's evidence based, that's all the more important.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Bowen.
Can I just take you up on your kind words about mentioning Salttree and the woodland that we're exploring? I mean, it's multifaceted again, but if there's anything that I can do to support you on that journey, I'm all up for it. So I know it's quite complex, but thank you.
Any other comments before we finish? Matthew, thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to help councillors a bit with the question that you get about this, about saving money. It sort of breaks even really when you have to involve experts like ecologists, when you have to do the signage, when you have to do the social media work and the extra work with parishes and the extra communication. The cutting, we're still sending a team to the site to cut the strip and the rest of the grass. So we're not saving anything on sending the team out. The team are there. It might save them 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, but then that cost is reflected back in the fact that that saving is lost when you're doing things like websites, when you're doing extra meetings, extra engagement, signage. That doesn't just happen by magic. That happens by teams, specialist teams that, in our other departments that load these things up onto the web page and make that doable. So I think that's the sort of feedback you can sort of give, is that information and that professionalism from ecologists, it doesn't come for free.
We're there. I just want to embarrass Matt a little, really, because I think him and the team have really got the bit between the teeth on these kind of things, and I think it's often how small initiatives start to infiltrate core business ways of thinking. So, only this week I got a very excited call from Matt, which I might fill a couple of you in on after the meeting. But we've been having a conversation about some kind of broken down fencing. Now, some of you might know that fencing can be ruinously expensive. It is one of those things where, actually it costs an awful lot of money. And Matt's like, I've been thinking about this, got an option. What would you think about if we planted some hedgerows along there? and actually rather than having kind of hard landscape, fencing, we went to some natural landscapes. And it's those little things where this is starting to infiltrate other aspects of what we do, and it will be a change. I think initially there might be some community concerns about some of that, it feels different. But I think that journey over the last 12 months has been a really marked one. But I think Matt and the team are very much at the forefront. I just wanted to sort of recognise that publicly in front of all of you, really.
Yeah, I just want to thank you on behalf of the panel for your presentation, and also can you send back to the team how much we appreciate the work you've been doing. So finally, item 8, support to the financially vulnerable. Are you giving a presentation as well? Yes.
Councillor Pitt's going to introduce the item.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Pitt. Oh.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having me. So I think it was in October that I was last here talking about this programme, and I started by talking about systems thinking and systems leadership. And I think the point I was trying to make then was that systems thinking is about recognising that a lot of things in life are interdependencies between lots of moving parts. And systems leadership is all about recognising that not one organisation or person is in control of a system, but maybe you've got to try and understand what the various different objectives are and try to reach a common ground. I think this is a really good example of that process in play at the moment. So I think the common ground that HDC and its partner organisations recognised is that it's quite a complicated landscape of support for people financially vulnerable or various other challenges that they're facing. And so lots of different organisations working in a similar field and perhaps in slightly different ways. So we recognised that challenge, but we were open about what the solution was to try and improve that situation. So we're looking to find a more holistic approach to respond to that need. And I think we've arrived at something I'm really comfortable with. I just want to share an epiphany I had with you probably a couple of decades ago now, and I worked in publishing. And there was a team that wrote a magazine, and there was another team that kind of laid it out and turned it into a magazine. And they all operated in the same open plan office space. And then for some reason, the one team moved to the basement, and it was an amazing shift in that office culture. Suddenly they talked about each other in kind of quite distant terms, and kind of blamed each other when things were going wrong. And it was just, they were 4 floors away from each other. Now, I'm delighted to say that I don't think that's what's going on currently in the landscape we're talking about here at HDC. But I think the epiphany I had was that actually having that sort of face-to-face environment with not just colleagues, but people working in the same space can have a really enlightening effect on that relationship. So you stop thinking about teams as the kind of corporate identity and actually think about the individuals. So that's my setup to handing over to Mr. Fox to talk about what we're looking at doing in this space. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. And Councillors, good evening. You'd be delighted to hear I'll attempt to be brief given the hour, but I will just briefly take you through the fundamentals of the paper. So, as Councillor Pitt mentioned, Scrutiny previously received a paper on our approach to supporting those in financial crisis or suffering financial vulnerability, and this is a specific element of that regarding to our arrangements with Citizens Advice Rural Cambridgeshire. And he does follow up that previous report and takes a golden thread from our approach to provide as holistic support as we can in what is a complex system. More specifically, we do have an existing corporate plan action, Action 11, as I'm sure you all know, about reviewing the way we support residents. So it is pursuant to that as well. And importantly, in a context of increasing and continued demand for services that support the financially vulnerable, but also with an eye on the fact that some of that support in the system, particularly the Household Support Fund, will almost certainly no longer be available at the end of this financial year as the government has ceased that particular scheme. So committee are asked to consider and comment on the report, and which outlines the rationale for our co-location of Citizens Advice Rural Cambridgeshire and our own Residents Advice and Information team. And the idea there is to reduce the friction, if you like, or the bounce around, not frictions between the teams as individuals, as Councillor Pitt noted, but the friction for people who are seeking support. They should be able to get the same quality and the best support if they phone Citizens Advice, if they phone the council. And very often, just due to the complexity of the system, people are bounced between it. And we believe this co-location is an important step to reducing friction between those services and improving customer journeys and customer outcomes, because these services, although distinct, are very complementary, and they do end up referring people to each other for particular elements of support. We believe that co-location will be best achieved by moving Citizens Advice from their current home at Eastfield House to here into Pathfinder House. And as part of that, at the same time, cease the rental recharge from Citizens Advice that they pay for HDC premises. And the amounts are in the report. That gives them about a 16% uplift in available resource. That will be ring-fenced in our funding agreement to support outreach and face-to-face services across the district. Most services are provided by telephone, by email, etc. There are groups of people who do prefer face-to-face services. That is an aspiration both for Citizens Advice and for ourselves and the people that we support when we talk to them. So we believe that move, that is a win-win in that without a significant extra cost, we can provide an extra services and increase the access to them. That money predominantly been used for rental costs, because CAB tell us that it is the rental cost of facilities that is the greatest barrier for them providing more outreach. It's not something that they don't want to do or that their volunteers won't do. CAB being predominantly a volunteer-led service, not a volunteer-led, volunteer-provided service. The report then goes on to talk about the kinds of things that we will consider in deciding where that outreach should take place, both in its location and its frequency. That won't be decided either by us alone as officers nor by CAB, but will be decided in partnership and will be determined by the criteria set out in the report at paragraph 3.10. They are a minimum criteria. We'll be delighted to hear from committee if you think we have missed anything. We are not at this point able to start the discussion on we think it should be location Z on a Wednesday afternoon, we think it should be location Y on a Tuesday. We simply aren't there yet. The report at present sets out the criteria we will be looking at to make sure that we can best match the extra capacity that we have released with where we believe the demand and the need is. So that's maps. Interesting as they are and lovely and coloured as they are but a starting point in just one area of consideration. In the report, there is an element of risk. So should we be able to re-let Eastfield House, there is potential that would be at least a zero financial effect to the council and our overall bottom line. If we re-let Eastfield House, it's very possible that there will be a positive effect, because there is a school of thought that says we might be able to re-let it for greater than the current rent charged to rural CAB. However, of course, we don't know until we try to let that facility, and there is a risk that we are not able to re-let it. Maybe challenging due to car parking, all sorts of other things. If we cannot re-let it, the greatest risk there is the current amount we recharge rural CAB, which is about 18,680. If we can't re-let it, that will be an ongoing annual cost to the council. I would argue strongly that that still represents a good investment for the organisation in terms of the extra resource, the extra capacity we are finding within CAB and the outreach and extra accessibility to services that will provide. But I have to point out that it is a theoretical risk. I'll stop there and happy to take any questions.
Anyone any questions or comments? Councillor Alban.
One comment, well, no, two questions really. One, just on the move here to Pathfinder House, I've understood this correctly. So theoretically, someone could come into our customer contact centre there or to CAB and be referred within another part of the building at that same visit. Have I understood that right?
The funding arrangements for CAB, as indicated in the paper, are quite complex, and there are multiple funders. But at the moment, that happens anyway. So CAB are here a couple of days a week, and people can walk in, and they're often referred through their attendance at DWP Job Centre Plus. And there are private rooms there where people can access CAB. The aim with this amount is not particularly to increase accessibility here at Pathfinder House, but to go into other areas, more rural areas. Transport may be an issue. It's the right thing that we deliver services here because people are coming here anyway. And one of the criteria you will see, I think it's criteria 4 in paragraph 3.10, is that we should go where people already go, food banks, or other sorts of places where people who might benefit from support will go. But no, people won't be coming inside the body of the council for face-to-face. This will be a base for CAB. They will continue to use the facilities at the front end should they wish to, and that still works. But the idea is that we increase accessibility elsewhere. Does that answer your question? Sorry.
It answers my question and answers one I wasn't going to ask. And in terms of representing a ward, this is one of the furthest from Pathfinder House. The fact that it enables outreach, from what you were saying, that's really good. As well as I think in my mind I'm comfortable with what you're saying, that I've just got a picture in my mind of someone walking in off the street and wanting help, and that even if it's on certain days, there might be someone that can help them immediately. So that's good. The second question I was going to ask was just looking at the table on page 249. At the risk of sounding like Donald Rumsfeld about known unknowns, I'm trying to phrase this question the right way. It's interesting to see the breakdown per ward of people, the number of clients. Do we know or have an idea, if just taking the one at the top, Alconbury, 37 clients, if 37 clients have presented, do we have an idea of how many people have thought, I'm not going to bother, I can sort it out myself, or what's the point? Are we able to measure how much of an idea of the problem this represents we're helping solve?
Yeah, it's really difficult understanding what the denominator is, what the actual need is. And these are people that have used the telephone service at present. So what we've tried to do is identify where the demand is coming from currently as a very rough proxy indicator of where the general demand is. That's why we then need to overlay other things like transport and accessibility. What we do know, and it was in the last scrutiny report that the Office of National Statistics set out that about 7.4% of our population are deemed to be income deprived. That's 13,500 across Huntingdonshire. So you will see these numbers actually scratch the surface in many cases. But this data alone does not necessarily allow us to say, oh, well, it's 281 from Huntingdon North, they must be okay. They're all phoning, and 37 from Alconbury. So that's where we need to do outreach. We need to bring all the considerations that are set out in paragraph 3.10 to bear when we look at where that outreach might best be placed. One of the things we can do, of course, is suck it and see. We will go, and if people turn up and we're busy, we'll stay, and if not, we'll move on and go somewhere else.
Thanks. If I can just jump in there. I think so. During COVID, obviously, all appointments went to telephone only for a while, and I think we're not back to the same place we were prior to that. And I think there's essentially a tension where, in terms of the team, what we want that the people working and volunteering for citizens' advice, we want them to be able to support as many people as possible. And on one level, sitting at a desk is really efficient, because wherever the need is presenting on that day or in that week, they can reach those people directly. The flip side is when you've got quite a complicated case and someone's got lots of paperwork and struggling, in that way you really need a face-to-face appointment. So the challenge will be just to strike that balance. So I'm sure that we want more, I think the agreement is that we want to have more face-to-face appointments than we do currently, but there still needs to be that balance. And so the team will be based in a sort of back office within this building on the telephones, and then there'll be a separate face-to-face appointments. I'm sure it will continue in Huntingdon and various other places. And so the challenge then will be getting we'd love to be within walking distance of everybody, but if somebody's only going to have one appointment in a day in a certain location, it doesn't make sense. So striking that balance is something for our officers and the team at Citizen Advice to figure out.
Any other questions or comments? No, in that case, thank you for that. Appreciate your contributions. And that's the end of our meeting. Thank you, everyone.